Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Neeru Tandon from Department of English, VSSD College, Kanpur. We are dealing with the third paper, 19th century English literature. In it, the module, it is George Eliot's Middlemarch, and it has been written by Dr. Vandana Sharma. Middlemarch, written by George Eliot. The complete name is Middlemarch, a study of provincial life. It was published in 1871-72. Now, when we talk about George Eliot's Middlemarch, but I am starting with the novelist, I say Mary Ann Evans. Now, the thing is, why I am talking about Mary Ann Evans? Who is she? Let me tell you, Mary Ann Evans is her real name, and she has taken this pseudonym George Eliot. You might be remembering Charlotte Bronte, who has taken the pseudonym Career Bell to publish her novels. The reason is same. Victorian society, which never welcomed women in the role of literateurs. Victorian society that considered that women have just two roles to play, that is, a wife and a mother. In such circumstances, when a woman with unlimited capabilities comes forward to write as an intelligent writer, then what happens? The first thing that she apprehends, that she is not going to be welcomed by the society. What will be the society's reaction towards the issues she is going to raise? That is a problem. And that problem was there with Mary Evans. So, she took this name, George Eliot, that sounded like a male name, so that her identity as a woman should not be disclosed. Mary Ann Evans, born in 1819 at Arbory Park in Esley near Coventry, was the gifted daughter of Robert Evans. Politically and socially conservative, Robert Evans advocated outward religious conformity for Marian. She faithfully tended house for her father until his death in 1849. Now, 30 years old Mary, she was considered long past the normal age for marriage in the Victorian era. She became assistant editor in 1851 and translated Essence of Christianity from German in 1854. It got published, and that was the only book which was bearing her real name, Mary. Mary Ann's rejection by her friends and family over her common law marriage with Lewis is reflected in the work The Mill on the Floss in 1860. Henry Lewis's wife had abandoned him for this extramarital affair. Still, Mary and Lewis, they continued to support each other. Well known for her realism and serious discussion of moral issues, George Eliot is the most philosophical of all the Victorian novelists. She took the name George Eliot, and hence for this module we will continue to call Mary George Eliot. Like George Meredith, she is the embodiment of philosophy in fiction, as Oscar Wilde remarked in 1897. She used this male pen name George Eliot, which was her effort to be taken seriously as a writer in this male-dominated literary world. In the hands of George Eliot, novel was not a vehicle for entertainment alone, but rather as a means of revealing the human predicament. You may notice that George Eliot refused to confirm the set models for women in the society. She refused that the end of the novel should be happy ending with a happy marriage, because she could never see that in the society. Her status as a new author of great power was confirmed by the enormously popular Adam Bede, published in 1859. Through her plots and characters, Eliot preaches that working only for self-gratification is dangerous to one's spirit. Virginia Woolf in The Common Reader opines, I quote, "The magnificent book that with all its imperfections is one of the few English novels written for grown-up people," unquote. Now let us talk about the novel itself, Middlemarch, the study of provincial life. Title is quite easy to understand what is the subject matter of the novel. It is relevant because reflection of realistic and vivid portrayal of the provincial life of England is there in the novel. Manifestation of England's changing values are mentioned by the novelist. Rosemary Ashton in Introduction to Middlemarch opines, I quote, "Middlemarch is above all about change and the way individuals and groups adapt to or resist change in their marriages, in their professions, in their family life and their social intercourse. The characters of the novel are shown responding in their various ways to events both public and private," unquote. Now, the setting of the novel is something that creates the background. Setting of any novel is very, very important to create the impression that the author wants to convey. Setting of Middlemarch is concerned, then we can easily say that the action of the novel takes place in Middlemarch, that is the name of the place, or the neighbouring parishes of Tipton, Lowick or Freshitt. As Quentin Edensor points out, it is a landscape of opinion and not any natural landscape which is dominant in the novel. This novel was set in years preceding the Reform Bill of 1832. Now, why Eliot has chosen this particular period? That was a debate. Because usually novelists either write about the contemporary society or they write or imagine something about the future. But why so? Why George Eliot did so? The answer was very well given by Ashton. It was said, I quote, "Eliot's purpose in setting her novel 40 years prior to the time she wrote it was to adopt the role of imaginative historian, even scientific investigator, who seeks to analyze recent political and social changes by means of the particular human stories she tells, by weaving together several strands in such a way that an individual's lot is seen to be affected by those historical changes as they happen," unquote. Any novel is known by its plot, and the Middlemarch plot is really strong. It tells the story of life in a small rural English town in the early 19th century. The novels highlight many scandalous topics as suspected murder, infidelity, secret past, gossip, politics and family feuds. But this particular novel's plot expresses it most probably the best way. Dorothea is the main character in the novel, who marries Reverend Edward Casaubon, an elderly priest, only to learn that he is not the real scholar. Rosamond Vincy has set her sights on Teritus Lydgate, the new doctor in town. Mary and Fred have been in love with one another since they were little children. Dorothy at the end of the novel decides that a chance at love is more valuable than riches. Many scandalous topics are covered by the novelist in this novel, including suspected murder, infidelity, secret past, gossip, politics, etc. The developing relationships of 4 couples form the backbone of the novel as these young people learn to relate to each other and the world around them. A common accusation leveled against it was its morbid, depressing tone. That, according to some critics, it is a limitation of the novel. That the novel is morbid, it is depressing. Many critics did not like Eliot's habit of scattering obscure literary and scientific allusions throughout the book. In their opinion, a woman writer should not be so intellectual, and she is supposed to write about marriage, love, and man-woman relationship only. Eliot hated this silly women novelist tag. In the Victorian era, women writers were generally confined to writing the stereotypical fantasies of the conventional romance fiction. But George Eliot, she broke those particular set traditions and come up with an intelligent novel known as Middlemarch. Moreover, Eliot's many critics found Middlemarch to be depressing because Eliot refused to bow to the conventions of happy ending. Her views about marriage were definite and she expressed them in her own way. According to her, an ill-advised marriage between 2 people who are inherently incompatible never becomes completely harmonious. Such is the case in the marriages of Lydgate and Dorothea. Dorothea was saved from living with her mistake for her whole life because her elderly husband dies of a heart attack. Lydgate and Rosamond, on the other hand, married young. Eliot's refusal to conform to happy endings demonstrates the fact that Middlemarch is not meant just for entertainment. 2 major choices for life govern the narrative of Middlemarch. One is marriage and the other is vocation. Short romantic courtships lead to trouble because both parties entertain unrealistic ideals of each other. They marry without getting to know one another. Marriages based on compatibility work better. Moreover, marriages in which women have a greater say also work better, such as the marriage between Fred and Mary. She tells him she will not marry if he becomes a clergyman. Let us discuss the characters of this novel. Dorothea Brooke is an intelligent and independent young woman who differs from the conventional woman of the Victorian age, just like her narrator. Rosamond Vincy comes from a family familiar with the comfortable lifestyle of middle-class society. Arthur Brooke is Dorothea and Celia's bachelor uncle. He is a bumbling man who can never stick to an opinion. Nicholas Bulstrode is a wealthy Middlemarch banker. He is married to Walter Vincy's sister. Eleanor Cadwallader is the wife of rector at Tipton Grange Brooks estate. Edward Casaubon owns a large estate called Lowick. He is a scholarly clergyman. Tertius Lydgate exemplifies the desires of an epic life, as Dorothea does, but unlike her, he finds his vocation in the study of medicine. The major themes discussed in the novel are imperfect marriage and repressed sexuality, and the second, defiance of Middlemarch society, social hierarchy as futile. Now, the first important theme comes in the form of imperfect marriage and repressed sexuality. Let's talk about these two things. Imperfect marriage. Writer has her own view regarding imperfect marriages. She already described in detail that the marriages should be based on the conformity, should be based on understanding and not because of the wealth or social status. Repressed sexuality is a theme discussed by her in detail, but she knew it well that the Victorian society was not going to welcome it. A woman discussing and talking about repressed sexuality was not to be welcomed. In the novel, Dorothea's marriage to Casaubon was a mismatch. Casaubon, involved in Key to All mythology, seeks to discover fundamentals about how all the mythologies in the world are related. She meets Ladislaw, Casaubon's cousin. Her character oscillates between Casaubon and Ladislaw. Dorothy's sexual suppression fades under her desire for Will Ladislaw. Dorothea's marriage to Casaubon, a sickly clergyman old enough to be her father, is a mismatch in every sense, so it remained unconsummated union. Her husband, her sexual companion, is much older than she is, and he seems least interested in any sort of physical aspect of their marriage. Casaubon's disinterest can be seen during their honeymoon in Rome. He is mostly involved researching his Key to All mythologies in the Vatican library rather than enjoying the company of his new young bride. As a result of this, she recognizes her sexuality not by herself or by her husband, but by Ladislaw, Casaubon's cousin, who made her realize that she is a woman and a woman is important for herself as well. Unlike her marriage to Casaubon, her union with Will is consummated, as they both give birth to a son. Her husband, Will, does what Casaubon could not do. He recognizes her sexuality and allows her to recognize it for herself as well. Most characters in Middlemarch marry for love rather than obligation, yet marriage still appears negative and unromantic. Marriage and the pursuit of it are central concerns in Middlemarch, but unlike in many novels of the time, marriage is not considered the ultimate source of happiness or the ultimate destiny of a woman. Debt appears throughout Middlemarch, and money often indicates elements of a character's personality. The plot is driven by characters worrying about money or asking others for money. The second major theme, known as defiance of Middlemarch society, social hierarchy as futile. The second theme, defiance of Middlemarch society, social hierarchy as futile, is there to be realized. The contrast between the genteel clergyman and reformed wayward underscores the futility of the social hierarchy. Negation of the predominant social reason and preference for a more modern, equitable union is felt. Dorothea's choice of marrying Will acts as a defiance of Middlemarch society. Marrying Will, Dorothea emphatically renounces her inheritance as she and Will declare their love for each other. Now just feel the difference. She says, "I don't mind about poverty. I hate my wealth. We could live quite well on my own fortune. It is too much. 700 a year. I want so little. No new clothes, and I will learn what everything cost. Thereby, marrying Will, she defies all of Middlemarch society. She doesn't disregard Will's heritage, rather seems to revel in it. A lady who places love above wealth. A lady who could realize that she is compatible with Will as a partner, and she values their relationship to every extent. Now, writer has used motifs in epigraph. Each chapter begins with a small quotation or a few lines of verse known as an epigraph. These epigraphs work as a way of summarizing the following chapter and moving the plot forward. They also work to place Middlemarch into a larger canon of literary works. Eliot has chosen quotes a variety of writers such as Shakespeare, Dante, Chaucer, and William Blake. Eliot was charged with being too intellectual for a woman author, in part because of this learned nature of choosing quotations from these great writers. Many symbols are used, like the portrait of Ladislaw's grandmother. A miniature portrait of Ladislaw's grandmother appears several times in the text and is symbolic of Dorothea's future choice of giving up wealth for love. We have Raffles. The character of Raffles symbolizes the ominous return of the past. Most often, he appears as a lawn back figure walking down the country roads and is described as a man of ill repute and questionable background, associating the danger of the past with the unsavory lower class. Two quotes from the book to make you realize, to give you feel of the language used by author. She said, I mean, marriage drinks up all of our power of giving or getting any blessedness in that sort of love. I know it may be very dear, but it murders our marriage. And then the marriage stays with us like a murder and everything else is gone. Unquote. Somewhere she says, but we significant people with our daily words and acts are preparing the lives of many Dorotheas, some of which may present a far sadder sacrifice than that of the Dorothea whose story we know. Unquote. Dorothea makes these comments to Rosamond at the end of the chapter 81. Dorothea believes that Rosamond is having an affair with Ladislaw, and this quotation shows how Dorothea believes romantic love and marriage are incompatible. By linking marriage and murder, Dorothea's quote supports the idea prevalent in the work that marriage is not always perfect or always a guarantee of happiness. The choice of the metaphor of murder is particularly interesting because she is speaking of Lydgate being under suspicion of aiding in the Raffles murder. Murder in the literal sense is already a part of Rosamond's married life. In her final thoughts at the end of the novel, Eliot shifts from third person to first person, plural, in order to present the moral of the story. The shift to the we breaks the rigidity of Dorothea's story being particular to the fictional world of Middlemarch and expands it to the greater real world. By calling attention to how the acts of common people create cultural norms, Eliot holds everyone who does not question the norms of social life responsible for the sadness of their fellow citizens. By focusing on the trials of Dorothea, Eliot calls particular attention to a woman's role in marriage. Ending on this thought makes Eliot's concern with conventional marriage the central theme of the story. This move points to a particular feminist type of thought in a novel long before feminism was a common ideology. The novel brings many questions in front of readers, like why does Lydgate's marriage fail? Why does Dorothea's marriage fail? Why did they get married to Rosamond and Casabon respectively? You should consider the contradictions between what they need and what they think they want in a spouse. How does self-determined choice play a role? How does chance play a role? Once you will get the answers of these questions, it will be very easy for you to understand the novel and the novelist in the real sense. To sum up, you should consider the novelist's courage as a woman to come forward for her folks, to come forward to express her thoughts so boldly regarding marriage and the willpower of woman. She talks about extramarital relationship, but I question, was it really an extramarital relationship? What she got out of that marriage? Husband who was for the name's sake. The marriage was never consummated. The husband was never interested in getting that marriage a successful one. What else she could do? The person who could understand her comes forward, and she decides to leave all the riches for the sake of that person whom she was in love with. This story brings many questions in front of us to ponder and to answer. Thank you for visiting EPG Pathshala.